This is Danita Vetter and Lisa Radin. Danita is the Vice President for Education and Programming for the Alzheimer's Association of the Delaware Valley. And you met her earlier this morning. Lisa Radin is a board member of AFTD and is also the Special Events Consultant for the Alzheimer's Association of the Delaware Valley. So I want to welcome both for all of the resources they can tell us about.
Thank you. Lisa and I will be doing an organized tag team act today. And one of the greatest things about today is that I get to work with my really great friend Lisa Radin from the Alzheimer's Association and also from the Association for Frontotemporal Dementia. Let's see, oh, you're going to help me out? Okay. We're going to try this afternoon to really tie some of the things that we've been learning about all day together. And in doing so, we'll be talking first a bit about Lisa's story as a family caregiver.
Good afternoon, everybody. Oh, I don't need this. Hold on. Got another mic. My journey started at the age of 50 when my whole life turned upside down. My husband and my business partner for 30 years started to change. His personality changed, his whole demeanor changed. And I knew something was wrong, but I really didn't know what was wrong, and I didn't know where to turn until his speech started to slur, and I knew, well, it wasn't psychological. I knew that there was more to it. And he went to see a neurologist after some prodding, and the diagnosis was probable PICS. And I said, now what is that? And maybe some of you have had that same experience. You heard a diagnosis, but really wasn't sure you even heard it before. And what I was told was, there's nothing you can do. The prognosis was not good. It's a progressive disease. It's only going to get worse. And I thought to myself, how am I going to deal with this? What am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? And I wasn't sure what I was going to do. There was no information. This is back in 1995. There was very little information out there. So that my children and I sat and talked, and I moved to New Jersey. I wasn't from this area. I was from Massachusetts, but my children were in Philadelphia. And so we moved here because I knew I couldn't do it by myself, although I thought I could do it by myself, and many of you may feel the same way. And what I decided to do was be proactive. I looked for a team of physicians that could maybe help me so that I met with Dr. Grossman at the time. I met with several other doctors. We met with a physiatrist to talk about physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy, to see where we could get as much information as we possibly could to help us through this journey. But as I was going through the journey, I truly felt this was my responsibility. This was my challenge, and as much as my children wanted to help, it was, I was going to take control of something I had no control of. And what happened, though, was I found, over as time progressed, the physical, the emotional, the financial toll that it took on me was almost unbearable. As far as the physical, I remember as the disease progressed, I was actually sitting at in my car at a stoplight, and I actually fell asleep at the stoplight. It scared me so that I thought, gosh, I have to find something to do. I have to help myself. And at that point, I was searching out a support group, and there was not a support group at that point specifically for FTD. However, I met with Helen Ann Comstock, and we talked about it, and that's when Helen was telling me about her husband, and she said, I've always talked about having a support group. And that was the beginning of her starting a support group specifically for FTD, and that goes back now over 10 years ago. So I had to search out something in some way to be able to cope with what was happening in my life. But I chose one thing. I said to myself, I'm not going to be a victim. I'm going to do as much as I can, learn as much as I can, and start to reach out, because I was doing the cooking, the cleaning, the washing. I was making the doctor's appointments. I was taking my husband to the doctor's appointments. I was trying to have each day be as best as it could be to give him the quality of life that I felt he should have and that I wanted him to have and that my children wanted to have. But again, it was something that I knew I just couldn't do by myself. So I started actually reaching out to other people and having other people help. And that's what allowed me to get through the journey that I had and that all of us have here, is really to reach out to get the support and the help that you need. And what I eventually did, and many of you know, I wanted to be sure that this experience, hard experience that we went through, was not going to be in vain. And I wanted to be able to help other people in their journey along the way. And that's actually how the book became developed, was the fact that What If It's Not Alzheimer's came about because I needed to find a way to take my energy that had been negative to something positive and do something that might help somebody else. And then eliciting the help of many people that I met along the way that did help me, are those people that actually wrote the chapters in the book. It was not, I didn't write those. They did, because they were the ones that helped me along the way. So what Danita and I want to do now is share with you some of the ways as caregivers, talk about some of the barriers, some of the things that stop us, stop me from reaching out, but finally be able to work that journey to make it as bearable as it possibly could in a situation that's so difficult. So that's what Danita and I want to share with you now.
Right, and can you hear me? Oh, good, all right. And I also want to say, Lisa, that in sharing your journey with, thank you, Mary, in sharing your journey with everybody else, some of the most painful things that have happened to you in your life, and Helene, and I've said this to you before, you have, helped yourself survive and helped your family survive, but she's also added so much to the community. And so I think that that's a great example, as our speaker said, our main speaker today said, in such a wild and crazy way. It's actually the same message that we're giving today, is that we've got to take what's really, really difficult in life and make it good for the community and good for everyone. So what did their speaker tell us that was in the way? Sometimes we're in our own way, and there are barriers to care, because we're all involved in the stress of caring for our loved one with FTD and other types of dementia. How do we know when we need help? And first of all, let's just define why we're in the situation we're in. Caregivers are under a lot of stress. We have to be very, very real about that. I see everybody, shaking and nodding their heads. Here are some of the things that are signs of stress for care partners, and certainly denial is one of them. And it's not just your denial. You may say, my husband or my wife will be better soon, because you can't face the fact that it's progressive degenerative disease that ends in death. But it also may be denial within the family. Perhaps you accept the diagnosis and what's going to happen, but maybe someone else doesn't. And there's a lot of conflict in your family about that. That creates a tremendous amount of stress on top of the guilt that's already present. Of course you're angry. You didn't want it, you didn't ask for it, you got it anyway, and it's lemons, all right? So it's not a great thing, and of course you're angry, you're only human. What do we do with the anger? Lisa described what she did with hers, but that was a choice. And we all have to recognize that we have choice as we go through these things. Some people withdraw and become depressed. And I think this goes with Exhaustion and sleeplessness as well. If you have someone and you're caring for them 24 hours a day and you're trying to do it alone, you're going to be exhausted. You may be wakened during the night. Somebody I talked to here today said, my husband last night pushed me out of bed all night long. I'm really tired today, I guess. And then in the next breath she said, and I'm really angry about that. And gosh, that's so understandable. Irritable, lack of concentration. I'm surprised all of you are really awake today. Look at you. I think it was that speaker after lunch. Everybody's awake and everything. And this manifests itself in health problems for the caregiver. There are repeated studies saying that folks who are providing care and they aren't getting help for themselves, they aren't taking time for themselves, also become ill, sometimes passing away before the person that they care for does. So these signs of stress are very, very important. And although it isn't pleasant to go over a list about stress, I think it is illustrative of what happens. I bet you every single one of you have had 1 or 2 or 3 or 4 or all of these symptoms during your caregiving. I want to just talk about depression a little bit because depression goes along with caregiving. I mean, we talked about depression being part of the complex of the person who has dementia for various reasons. When the brain chemistry isn't working right, people with Alzheimer's disease and frontotemporal dementia or any of the dementias that we've discussed today get depressed. And rightfully so. They're certainly going through a lot of grief, a lot of changes. So are you. And so many caregivers think, I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps. I said that I would take care of him or her till death do we part. And that's admirable in one sense, but in another sense, it really could be. You know, you're bringing on till death do you part. So if I wanted to put the signs of depression up here because so many caregivers become depressed during the course. And the thing is, depression is treatable. And we're all sort of afraid of it, and there's a stigma about it. You might not want to take the time to go to the doctor, or those sorts of things. But look at some of these signs and think about it. I mean, there's various ways to determine whether or not you're depressed, but here's one way. If you have 4 or more of these symptoms lasting for 2 weeks or longer, everybody gets down once in a while. But if these things last and you can't seem to do much about any of them, profound sadness and tearfulness, taking no pleasure in usual activities. I mean, we saw our speaker today talk about walking in the boxes. That's what depressed people do too. If you're isolating yourself, if you're having changes in your eating patterns too much or not eating at all, or eating very little, changes in sleep patterns, increased agitation, fatigue, feelings of worthlessness, hopelessness, excessive guilt, or recurrent suicidal thoughts or plans, then you really do need to seek attention for that. And that's very, very super important.
Danita hit one of the first ones on the barriers, and that was denial. And then we just talked about depression. But one of the things I mentioned was that super person, that person that we feel we have to do it all, that no one else can do it, no one can do it as good. It's up to us to be able to do that. It's so important for us to realize that we may be the barrier ourselves. Okay? It may be us, you know, each of us, that are putting that barrier up by saying we need to do it all. So that's one of the things that is really important. And also, not accepting assistance. Again, it's the barrier that thinks we have to do it all. It's my job. It's my responsibility to be able to take care of my husband or my wife, whatever it is, or my brother. So taking that and not accepting assistance is certainly the barrier. There are also cultural beliefs, where in certain cultures, it is up to the family member to take care of everybody else in the family. So the cultural barriers sometimes are effective. Then Danita's going to mention a little bit about the legal criteria that goes on.
Well, I think that Katie really hit upon that this morning, this afternoon when we were talking about some of the things in advocacy. We have some barriers that we're facing, particularly when we're talking about younger people with cognitive impairment getting any services from our area agency on aging or whatever that office might be in the state in which you reside. They do go by different names in different states. But those people who are the financial keepers of the keys as far as community services such as adult day care or in-home services, overnight respite services, assisted living, and long-term nursing home type care. When you have a dementia process before the age of 60, it's extremely difficult to get financial assistance and sometimes even information about these services. And then when you find services or you happen to get some kind of financial assistance for these services, sometimes folks don't feel that they're very appropriate for, let's say, a 50-year-old with a dementia, with a cognitive impairment, to be involved in an adult daycare program where, you know, folks are 75, 80, 90, 95, and there's a very, very big difference in those ages. So we have some barriers that are actually built into our system, which advocacy is certainly one way for us to go about attacking those issues. And that has to be a long-range plan. That's not really something that happens overnight. But we start with awareness, and we're talking about it today, and we need to talk about it not just among ourselves, but we need to talk to those people who have power in these areas that can help us to make changes in the way local, state, and federal legislation is written so that we get the support and the help that we need.
Then the financial limitations. It would be nice if all of us had all the money that we needed to take care of the person that needs the care. However, for many of us, and including myself, we didn't have all of the finances. And it came to the point in my own life where our funds ran out. I really had. I was against the wall. All the money was really used up, and it was like, where do I go from here? And my son said to me, who was a caregiver along with my daughter, said to me, you know a lot of people. I had been in an industry where I met people all over the U.S. and Canada and had friends all over North America. And my son said to me, I'm going to write a letter. I'm going to put a letter together, and I'm going to write a letter and let people know the circumstances that you're in. And I was so appalled to think that I was going to tell the world what was going on in my personal life. And I gave him a very hard time with it. And finally he convinced me that he was going to send that letter, and he did. And I have to tell you that that's what got me through the last 2 weeks of my husband's life. In a matter of 2 weeks, I had $10,000 in cash. It is amazing, and I'm not saying people should do this. I'm not saying it's easy to do. It certainly wasn't easy for me. But what I'm saying is reaching out some way, somehow, to get the help that you need. Because what it taught me at that point was there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help if they know you need help. So it is reaching out and breaking that barrier. But financially, for many of us, it is a problem. Okay, and I think you covered the last one.
I think so too, Lisa.
Services. Okay.
So what can we do? Well, what we have to do is really look to informal support systems. And that really means, as Lisa just began to broach the topic, getting help from your family and friends. And the first thing you have to do that is to let folks know that there is an issue and that you would be willing to help them. But sometimes people don't know how to get started in doing that themselves. There may be some unwilling parties, and of course they're going to have a choice in that. So, you know, some people will X out right away. But there are going to be some people who will give you support. And I hope, Helen Ann, you won't mind me telling your story about the way you got help when your husband was ill. I've heard you tell the story in public before many times. I have permission, good. Nothing like putting you on the spot, Helen Ann. Helen Ann's husband had Pick's disease, and she realized very wisely that she was not going to be able to do all of the work that would be necessary to take care of her husband and be well herself also. So Helen Ann got a group of her friends together, and she brought information about Pick's disease and sort of educated the group. Because if the group, for the group we could also substitute the word family. In her case, it was her friends. If they can't all understand what's going on and use the same kind of language and the same criteria for understanding, then you may not get consensus across the group. But she very wisely brought with her information about the disease. She shared her story much like Lisa shared her story. And she asked her friends for 1 hour of help each a week. And there were 25 people in the room. Am I right, Helen Ann? Everybody gave Helen Ann an hour of respite care. Or
it was a wine and cheese party.
oh, it was. I wasn't there, so I had no idea the consent was plied with alcohol. But okay. Whatever works, I say. Right, Helen Ann? Whatever works. Well, if you, Helen Ann does love her wine and cheese, and so do her friends. So she got them there, and she presented this to them, and they all gave her 20, they each pledged an hour a week. And I bet you, if I'm a friend and somebody asks me to give an hour, and I get there and I feel good about what I'm doing, I'm sure some people were there longer than an hour. So Helen Ann really did what Lisa did with her finances. Helen Ann did around time, and they built, a little plan, and these plans actually work. That's what we would call building an informal support system. So it starts with identifying your group members, and knowing, there may be some people that will not participate. That's their choice. You're just giving them an opportunity to do what's right and good. Sometimes these things can work if you're shy about doing it yourself. Your son facilitated yours because Lisa didn't feel that she could. It could also be a good friend. It could also be a member of the Alzheimer's Association. It could be a group meeting, and there were other third-party people, geriatric care managers and counselors and other people who can help you work out a group plan where you put together a list of daily tasks or weekly care needs, and you actually ask people for what you want. And just like when we go to our advocates and we ask them for specifically what we want, that's what you ask them for. So you make up a list. Maybe it's grocery shopping. Maybe it's bringing in a meal every night. Maybe it's sitting with that person so you can have your hair done, your nails done, go to your faith service, play cards with your friends, whatever it is that makes you feel somewhat normal. You have to identify those things and ask for them. If it's financing, that's also fine. Then you may, if it's tasks, you want to match the person to that task. There may be one person that's great at writing a letter, like your son, and then there may be another person in the family who is a whiz on the computers and can get it out by email and get it to more people. And there may be someone who loves to cook or loves to read. I got a lot of pleasure out of reading to a friend of mine who had dementia, who went to Europe and wrote himself a diary, a day-by-day diary, and his wife couldn't read it to him one more time. But I read it to him, and it took me about 3 months to read it to him in 2-hour increments. And it was a great joy to him, and I really enjoyed it myself. I learned all about Europe. I've never been, but I sure, when I go, I had my personal tour guide write it for me, so pretty good. So then obtain commitments from them. And then, you know, sometimes folks don't like to commit to something forever. So maybe you want to say to people, why don't we try this for a month? This especially works with family members. Here are your assignments. Here's what I'd like you to do. I have your commitment. Let's try it for a month. And then let's get together again for more wine and cheese and talk about it and see how it is. Tweak it, change the plan. And then remember that the plan will need to change as the disease progresses, because things definitely do change. They can change slowly or they can change rapidly depending on what the course of the disease process is. So the plan maybe need to be tweaked all along. And then you want to determine eventually, as the disease progresses, informal supports may no longer be appropriate. And there may be need for formal supports as well. So we'll talk a little bit about what formal supports are. But the point is, things change in the disease, and you just want to keep your eyes open, using really safety as a guide as to when things need to change. Or your level of fatigue is also a good guide for changing your plan.
Okay, let's talk about, and we have 5 minutes, so I was just given the signal, so we have lots to talk about, you know, in 5 minutes. So I'll go through this quickly. But let's talk about in-home companion. That could be someone, again, that's a neighbor, someone who's a senior citizen, someone who is a student, who has some time where they could come in and just spend some time for a few hours a week or a day, whatever it is that fits your needs. Just come in and spend time with the person that has the cognitive impairment. The person may be able to basically do a lot of things on their own, but needs someone to be in the house just for safety factors. Mm-hmm. So it could be just a companion. It also could be in-home health aid. Someone where more services are needed, but again, having someone come in the home so that you get out those few hours a day, whether it be 2 hours or 3 hours, whatever it is, but you know that the person at home is being taken care of. They may have to be fed, they may have to be do toileting, but it's someone that's capable of doing that. And from my own experience, sometimes you have to go through 3 or 4 of them till you get the right person that really fits your need. Mm-hmm. And speak up if you're not getting what you want, okay? Don't just let it go and hope that it's going to get better. If that isn't the right person, ask them to send somebody else. Again, you're paying for that service. Adult day centers. I know so many of us say, well, but my husband is, 55, 56 years old, going to an adult day center. He's going to be, it's something that Danita alluded to, that he's with people that are 60 or that are 70, 80 years old. He doesn't belong there. Well, that's our perception, okay? That's the barrier that we put up. But really, it is something that for socialization could be very, very helpful. When someone's in the home, that's all they see is their immediate family. It's not the same socialization. So by having them go to an adult day center, they're getting different socialization. The people there are trained and may have the person do more than you can have them do at home. So look into it, check into it, see that it can work for you if you're open-minded to it. And the last thing is the short-term respite care. So important for all of us. Think about when was the last time you got away for a really good block of time. I know for me, I see someone shaking their head, no. For me, it was very rare until my children, my daughter actually made a time to take me away for overnight because I was so resistant, I just wouldn't go. I had to be there, or the feeling had to be there. So that could be somewhere where you go and someone comes into the house, or the respite could be, there are some services where you can actually bring your loved one to an overnight facility where they can stay overnight, just for 24 hours. It could be just for 12 hours. But again, short-term respite care is really, really important. Okay, this is, again, many of us have children, and children are sometimes caregivers for us. They're in the home. So let's not forget the children. Let's talk about it. Sometimes we just sort of, the children are the ones that, and no matter what the age, we're so, I'm going to say as a parent, was so absorbed in what I was doing that sometimes I didn't let my children in, and they needed to be let in. They needed to know that they were part of this process. So don't push them away. If they want to help, be sure to make sure there's things that they can help. For younger children, the Alzheimer's Association has their website. There's a children's page. We have a flyer that anyone that's coming to our session, that's 101 things that can be done with someone with cognitive impairment, activities that can be done. And Danita, want to finish off?
Just in conclusion, we really want you to think about changing your mindset and really take care of yourself. It's really important to do that. We'd love to help you get started. If you'd like to give the Alzheimer's Association a call, we have people standing by 24 hours to help you get started in making that kind of a plan. Please do get medical attention for yourself as needed, and don't forget about thinking about your own needs as far as feeling well psychologically. Make time to take breaks and accept help. Thank you.